If you can take a stance that says, I am second, despite what we're all being fed, to be the best, to be the top, to be the richest, to be the fastest, is any multimedia today is what it's trying to tell us. If you can take a stance to say, I am second, and maybe that's your family, in some cases, your coworkers, a complete stranger you'll interact with today or tomorrow, and a stance that says, you know what, I am thankful for the life that has been given to me, despite how long it'll last, despite how fruitful it may or may not be. But you know what, I woke up today with oxygen in my lungs, and I woke up today with an opportunity to live in the greatest country ever established on this world. And let that be the burning fire inside of you.
All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Adapt You podcast. I am super stoked to introduce to you our guest, somebody we are honored and just truly blessed to have just an hour with today, Chaz Bagwell. So now a quick little aside about Chaz. Chaz is somebody I've actually known for a number of years. And in a former life, before opening a marketing firm and having this podcast, Chaz and I were business partners. We're business partners for many years. He's somebody that I have such an admiration for, and somebody that has made a profound impact on my life. So it only made sense to bring him on the show in hopes that he can make a similar impact on your life. He is the embodiment of what it means to be completely balanced as an individual, both mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And that didn't happen just by accident. You know, this is not something that Chaz just stumbled upon. Like many of us, he went through hardships and he went through challenges in his life, but the approach that he took to them and what he learned from them and how he grew from them is really what separates this young individual, because he's younger than me, quite a bit from the most, is his ability to change and to adapt to challenging situations on his route to becoming the absolute best version of himself. Chaz holds a very special place in my heart because as I was going through challenging times in my life, he was by my side. Not only there to smack me in the head when I needed to be smacked in the head, but also as an individual there to lift me up and to give me guidance. And again, at a young age, he is wise beyond his years. He is not only an incredible athlete, but he's an incredible businessman. He was a three-sport athlete growing up, played and chased a Major League Baseball career, which we'll talk about, and had the opportunity to work out with some Hall of Famers, which he tells an incredible story about. From there, he's transitioned into the professional world. First, he was working and owning different businesses, then decided to work for a startup that is blowing the roof off when it comes to using and leveraging blockchain and AI to solve most of healthcare's revenue cycle problems. He currently holds the position of VP of Sales for this company, which by the name is called Mindshift. Keep an eye out for these guys because they are taking the healthcare industry by storm because Chaz is at the wheel. Chaz is a very, very spiritual, God-driven individual who done dozens of mission trips, including 6 to Africa alone, where he learned some profound lessons that he applies to his life, which you'll hear on today's podcast. He is a recent father of 2 beautiful boys, a German Shepherd that is an absolute monster, but will, while it may rip your face off, it'll lick your hands when you walk in the door. And somebody that is just rooted in taking a holistic approach to life. If you open up the cabinets of Chaz's kitchen, you won't find a box or a bag. You won't find processed foods. You won't find anything that is not completely natural, down to the soap, deodorant, and toothpaste that he uses. Because as Chaz says, if you put it on your skin, it's just like putting it in your mouth. So this is somebody that we can all learn from, and somebody that it was important to get on the show because of the lessons he learned in his life that maybe we can have perspective on similar situations we've had in our life and what he pulled from that to become the absolute and continues on his journey to become the absolute best version of himself. And, right now, as before I pull Chaz here up to the mic, his current situation is he's got his 2-year-old son running around the house pantless because they're potty training him. So if there are a couple disruptions during the process, I think you'll understand. So with that said, let me introduce to you Chaz Bagwell. All right, Chaz, welcome to the show, man. Good to have you.
Hey, thanks, DP. Proud to be here, man. It's my honor.
Absolutely. So how's that scene over at your house right now?
Right now, I have a 2-year-old running around with no underwear. All carpets and rugs have been pulled up, and we're chasing around him like a hawk. The new theory now, man, is with potty training, which is what we're doing here. They recommend you just completely naked from the bottom down, so not to mimic anything like a diaper. And so it's 72 hours of pure hell, if I could put it lightly.
Interesting. So now, do you get any indication from your oldest child? Congratulations on the new edition, by the way. Do you get any indication as to when this storm might be coming, so to speak, and whether it's going to be a number one or maybe a number two? And really, or is it just you just hear something hit the floor?
He's the type that only time you get the warnings when he starts laughing after the fact. There are no physical signs. But the other thing, we're essentially waterboarding him. The whole key is to keep him wanting to have to go pee, right? So we're basically continuing to feed water, juice, milk, throw out anything you believe in from a nutrition perspective for 72 hours, because your apple juice to get him to go, and then your M&Ms and Reese's eggs, for when he goes, right? So two things that I don't believe in, as you well know. But yeah, I mean, it's a heck of a process, that's for sure.
So you've got a pantsless child running around the house eating M&Ms and Reese's eggs and laughing. It sounds, honestly, when you describe that, it sounds a little bit like my freshman year in college, to a certain extent. Just instead of orange juice, maybe there might have been some vodka in there. Just saying. But
yeah, you and me both. And it's one of those moments where you remember the times before you had kids and you used to look at other families and say, no way in hell I would ever let my kid do that or do that. And now I'm doing all those things, right? So it's just interesting how the perspective begins to shift when you get into sheer survival mode versus looking at it from a third party.
Oh, 100%. And when you become a parent, you turn into, the parent that used to rip on, when you were growing up. I remember when I moved into a neighborhood right out of college, got my first home. I drove, maybe a little quicker than maybe I should have into my neighborhood. And I used to have, these neighborhood guys and moms who would yell at me, and I'm like, I'm going 20. It's not that fast, right? But as soon as I had children, I used to sit at the top of my driveway and roll basketballs down the hill and try to time it with the teenager that was driving too fast. So hit the basketball and then let them know, like, hey, that could have been my child. It's just funny how your perspective changes,
It's really amazing, man. In most cases for the better, there's no doubt about it, but it is a very interesting process.
Yeah, and the whole notion of not wearing pants has really become a thing in this new era of Zoom calls. I mean, it's quite possible that neither of us have them on right now. I can tell you, how many Zoom calls have you taken where you've just put a shirt on and you had sweatpants downstairs?
Oh, I would say it's upwards of 50% of my calls are business up at the top and whatever I got going on down below. There's no doubt about it.
Party down below, right? Yeah, it's the modern day Zoom mullet, we'll call it. Yeah. So, Chaz, as discussed in the intro, you and I have a relationship. We've known each other from the past, and I didn't get into it in the intro. You want to kind of jump in a little bit, tell us maybe how you and I connected, and some of the growth we've had as business partners and as friends over time.
Yeah, I mean, you and I met, man, I guess we're going on probably 2014, 2015, something like that. We met in a business relationship where, we were kind of maybe peers at the time. I was working for a different organization. Both the orgs came together to kind of run a national sales force, in which we did very successfully. From that point on, I think you and I quickly realized the skill sets and the attributes that we shared, the morals that we had, the way we viewed life. There was so much that intersected in those two Venn diagrams between Chaz and Derek that it was a natural progression to go into business together. But more importantly, we became dear friends. So that kind of natural process got us to where we started the MedRep together, right? Took all those same things we learned, built a new business around it, was very successful in doing so. And now we're off to doing separate things again. My gut tells me, right, our paths will continue to cross quite frequently in the future. But that's kind of been the progression up until man. So now I just am blessed and grateful to call you a dear friend of mine.
Likewise, brother. Yeah, it's been a journey, and it's been a bit. You know, we like you said, we started as sort of business acquaintances, and I saw something in you, very similar to the angel investor saw in you when you came out of college. You know, from a business perspective, you just sort of had those intangibles, those things that you can't teach. Those things from a coaching perspective, you look, you know, at in an athlete, you just look at in a person, and those attributes were things I was like, man, I was like, I just the way that we were able to connect, that it can't really still put a finger on it. You know what I mean? The conversation always comes so natural, right? There's this podcast was literally scheduled hours ago. And we're going to be talking off the cuff about your story and sort of your progression to who you are today, because it's very interesting. And, you know, I don't want to spend a lot of time on our business ventures before in the past or the ones that will come in the future, but I really kind of want to get into your story, because your story really sort of resonates with this, with sort of the messaging of Adapt You and of this podcast, which is that of change. So, and your story is rooted in athletics. We have a lot of athletes that listen to the show, but then it sort of transcends into every space and every facet of your life thereafter. Those things that you learned as you went through, you know, your struggle and your process. So, let's start for a minute and talk about your athletic family that you've grown up around, and sort of your childhood, and how that sort of led you down a path of following and chasing that dream of sports, and what that sport was.
Yeah, essentially, I'd start by saying I grew up with a bunch of lunatics. This was a culture, Derek, that it was when and nothing else. Do so at all costs. Obviously, not foregoing any of your morals and things like that. But from a physical and mental approach perspective, was simply you'll be the best teammate out there. You'll outwork everybody, and even the times, which in most cases was true for me, I was not the most gifted person on the field or on the court, but I can promise you, there was not going to be any grace when it comes to outworking those that were around me and supporting them to do so. So I had this really nice perspective, although I grew up hating it at times, as many of us did when our dads coached us hard. I grew up really appreciating the fact that the motto was treat every play, every ground ball, every shot, every pass like it was going to be my last one. So it was kind of this mix between go grind your ass off, be the best out there, and keep working until you've achieved it, but also be aware and be thankful for the ability, and speaking to much of my Christian faith, be thankful at just the opportunity that you get to have two working legs and two working arms and a clear head and a healthy body, and those around you that loved you. So that culture, man, were really, I guess, driven to me probably at a younger age than most. I mean, I remember, you know, being at a ping pong table with my dad at 7 years old, where most dads would let their son win. My dad was spiking ping pong balls in my face and laughing at me, until I got to the point where he can't touch me on a court now, and he'll tell you that, right? So it was a very interesting approach, maybe one that's maybe not welcomed as often anymore, but it was very much the old school mentality that kind of drove my early years. And honestly, the end goal was always, at some level, professional ball was always in everyone's mind, but more importantly, wanted to pay for my education, right? Which it ultimately did, and make a lot of friends and memories along the way. I mean, I had 6 groomsmen at my wedding. 5 of them were from childhood sports, right? We all know the bonds that creates. And so the fruit that was spun off of that culture, Derek, was one that, I mean, still feeds me today, both personally and professionally.
Now, you know, it's amazing when I hear some of the stories that you talk about, sort of your upbringing. There was some of the stories you would talk about when it came to just the meticulousness by which you needed to keep your uniform. So, and what that taught you, even today, the way you dress and the way you think about putting on your clothes, that you've shared with me before in the past. I think there's something for the listener to learn and understand from that process, where it started, right? How it was pounded into your head, literally, and then from there, how it transitioned to the shirt, shoes, and belt, socks, which are going to be some badass socks. I can promise you right now, if Chaz has socks on, they are excellent socks. He's a sock guy. You know, and how that all started. So
yeah,
again, it's all about the conditioning.
Yeah, I recall back to one example specifically. The rules were always shoes were going to be cleaned or polished in general, specifically your cleats. Your uniform was going to be clean, and when you're a little kid, obviously your mom's doing most of the laundry, and you're going to have every piece of that uniform with you, right? You're going to wear your hat on the right way. You were going to present well. You had a name on your jersey that wasn't about Chaz; it was about the team and the coach and the leadership and the program you were representing, right? Much today, that's the same for our professional lives. I can remember a specific example. We used to film our at bat. So my dad couldn't make it because he was working. My mom would film the at bat, or the coach would film the at bat for a couple of reasons. One is obviously to watch film, like we all did growing up, but also to kind of find some strengths and weaknesses, and obviously to have home videos one day. So I'm at this tournament, go 3 for 4 with a couple of doubles, had a great game. Go back to watch the film. My dad, he just wants to see, hey, how'd you do today? How'd you play, etc. And I remember him pausing the film, thinking, like, what's up? You know what I mean? Like 3 for 4, 2 dubs. That's a pretty good outing for most, right?
Solid outing, yeah.
He said, "Where's your belt?" I'm like, well, I'm watching the swing. I'm watching where my barrel is. I'm watching, how my lower half looks, my eyes on the ball, and he wants to know where my belt is, right? It was very much a learning experience for me because it showed me that, look, you can have a great game, you can be a great athlete, you can be the best on the field in some cases, but if you don't pay attention to the small things, okay, that's going to hurt you down the road. And so today I take that approach, and that was numerous examples continue to grow up, but today I take that approach in taking care of the small things. Now in meetings, it's be there 5 minutes early, look presentable, have the appropriate agenda items for everybody that's going to be attending. Make sure you did your homework on those folks, right? So you just start paying attention to these little things. And what's amazing in today's culture and professional landscape, if you do those small things, I'm a firm believer you are ahead of 90% of the field, right? And many of those things are just flat out overlooked today. And in most cases, and most etiquettes are accepted, right? So I have to kind of peel it back a little bit sometimes because I'm a little bit of a maniac when it comes to them. So when I go to coach my teams or train my guys or girls from a sales rep perspective, I have to kind of be careful, right? Because not everybody was conditioned like that, right? However, I will not forego or forsake my beliefs in that taking care of the small things are always going to benefit one in today's society, right? There's no question about it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you and I were continually amazed when we were in business together, not by the people that would do those, what we'll call fundamentals, right? Just like there are fundamentals in sports, right? Layups, free throws, tying your shoes right, looking presentable in the workplace. But we were continually amazed by the people that actually did those things, because that's more that's not common. It's more the outlier. Because unfortunately in business that we've seen with a lot of individuals we ran across in our workings together, they just wouldn't do those simple things like show up to meetings. And so today when people do that, we're amazed. Well, the reality is that should be the norm, right? Mm-hmm. You should show up on time. You should be dressed presentable and those types of things. And it seems like a little bit of that has been lost. So it's great to see that was something that was sort of instilled in you in sports. And to this day, I remember with Chaz, we were at a meeting once, and I think we only had one meeting. We had to fly somewhere. We were there for like one hour meeting, and he brought like 6 outfits. I was like, Chaz, I'm like, why did you bring so many clothes? Right? He's like, listen, he goes, when I get dressed for the meeting, it's like putting my uniform on before the game. And I was like, all right, I get that. I dig that.
That's right.
And that's the approach that you take. So, and I appreciate that. So obviously these things were instilled as you as a child, right? These small little things that you carry into the nuggets of your life today. And you were a multiple sport athlete, right? Baseball, football, yep. Basketball as well.
Correct. Stop that in middle school. Yeah. Yeah. And ping pong, of course.
So, and for anybody that knows Chaz, like if we just go to play catch out in the backyard and play football, it's not like your normal soft toss. It's John Elway type throws. There's a level of intensity that you bring to the table, which he carries in every aspect of his life. That again was taught and ingrained, which he's going to talk more about. But sort of talk about now your sort of your journey as you got later into high school and where you took your athletic endeavors and really take some time and start to get into all that you went through that process and all that you learned.
Yeah, I would say So where I took it. So right after high school, like many athletes, was trying to become recruited, get scholarships, was trying to actually be a dual scholarship athlete, where you go and play two sports. But in the NCAA at that time, you could only actually accept a full scholarship from one sport. You'd be a preferred walk-on essentially with the other sport. But prior to doing that, I spent some time in the Dominican Republic in their professional academy. I was there for a few weeks. We essentially went down there, and for every major league campus that we have here in the States, for every major league team, they have a campus there that they would raise up athletes. And there, the interesting thing is, one, once you're 16-year-old, two, you have to play ball in order to feed your family, right? And then three, just like here, only 1% of you actually makes it off the island to go and actually make something of yourself. So there's just a different take there, Derek. They're literally fighting for their life, and so because of that, their work ethic, the things that they do, the things that they say, their approach to the game, I learned a ton from it. One, the fact that I showed up with cleats and a glove. Most cases they didn't have either, right? I remember being literally in the jungle, seeing barefoot folks with like cotton wool socks on their hands, using them as gloves. I saw the best talent I had ever seen in a place where they'll probably never be discovered, right? In a place where they literally can't feed their families or contribute. So that to me was really eye-opening, and it really changed my take on my approach to the game. Having spent time there and then coming back here and ultimately getting a scholarship to play ball here, got a baseball scholarship, was going to try to walk on, like I said earlier, preferred walk on a football to be a two-sport athlete. I was actually better at football. More money was given to me for baseball. And then I had something smack me right in the face. I woke up in my freshman year on a college campus, and I couldn't get out of bed. And I thought at that time, don't know what it is, but there it goes, right? I immediately had this, oh my goodness, it's gone feeling. Come to find out, long story short, I had some really bad things happening with my hips. So I had essentially 4 total hip reconstructions. So at 18 years old, I'm literally getting wheeled into a surgery where many of the counterparts there are 65, 70 years old, and I'm going to have the same surgery they're having, right? I remember that my MRI was sent to one of the orthopedic surgeons who operate on a bunch of MLB athletes that you would know. And without my demographics being sent to him, and they said, who is this? What is this patient's demographic? What do you think about it? As an anonymous source, they said, it's a 75 to 80-year-old male, right? I'm 18 trying to play at the highest of levels in the sport of baseball, right? And as you know, the sport of baseball, you have to have both your core and your hips, which are a part of that, to be operating at a very high level. So I essentially went from performing at a top tier to being wheeled around by my now wife in a wheelchair around a college campus for 8 weeks, man. It took me to a place that was physically embarrassing, emotionally dark, and overall at a spot where I had to do some real soul searching, bro. I mean, I had to get to a point where I can't use my legs now really well. And I've been given at that time a wheelchair and then eventually crutches. So these 2 metal sticks I'm walking around with, and I'm trying to figure out, will I ever even play again? At that time, I was even trying to think, will I ever walk normal again? So I rushed the recovery back, trying to be as hungry as I could. I'm back in I want to say they quoted me like a year's recovery. I'm back in 6 months. Okay. I remember my coach saying, we need you. My dad saying, we got to do it. So I'm going to do it. Right. I remember biking every day because that was the only therapy that I had was pedaling, low impact pedaling. So I made myself a homemade Live Strong shirt that my 2 trainers had actually helped me make to get my mind right I'm going to attack it every day, right? I'm going to bike. We're going to do this thing. I'm going to rock and roll, put in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles on it to get back to where I could perform. Come back, get back on the field, trying to make it, boom, get hit again. I got to have the same surgeries over because I've essentially, by rushing it, I've created a setback, right?
So now are you still in college at this point?
I'm in college at this point. Yeah. So now that first surgery was officially sophomore year. My next surgery is less than 18 months later, right?
Wow.
So I'm 4 hip reconstructions in. So when you do a bilateral hip reconstruction, they put you to sleep, and instead of having one part of your body worked on, they work on both. So you're having 2 surgeries, but it's one procedure, if you will, right? So I've had 4 hip reconstructions, but they only put me down twice. So when you go to rehab, dude, you're rehabbing 2x, right? So it's 100 reps or 100 pulls or 100 steps or 50 miles on a bike, but you go times 2, right? Because you've got right and left protocols. And so here's the problem, right? Right may be progressing faster than left. So now you're balancing, right, these counterbalance situations where you're progressing stronger on one side than you are the other. It just creates a whole whirlwind, man. So come back from that same situation, back in a wheelchair, back to my wife literally helping me get my shorts on, right? To you got one more try at this thing, right? You're either going to let it you're going to tuck and run, or you're going to make yourself an example, one for yourself to know you can do it, but for also those around you, man. Again, getting back to my culture growing up, which is not only having gratitude for having 2 healthy legs, you see it coming full circle now, right? But also making sure that those around me, I can be an example and be more of a thermostat than a thermometer, which has been my motto from Jump Street. At that point in time, right, I'm also, right, having other stories that you and I have talked about where when I got back from that, I got the opportunity to train with a couple of professional athletes. So I stumbled into a facility here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I walk in and there are, if I named them out here, Hall of Famers sitting in the waiting room, future Hall of Famers sitting in the waiting room waiting to be trained. And I'm in there as a college athlete post for hip reconstructions, man. And that was the first time where I realized that the American dream was probably an American lie, right? And realized that there was going to be a time where I could outwork everybody. But there are God-given talents that hard work can't necessarily overcome from the perspective of trying to make it in that sport. These guys, again, are going to be future Hall of Famers. I never ultimately got signed, right? But by God, I showed up every day and I outworked them, and I made a commitment to myself. Can't hit a baseball as far as they can. It doesn't sound like that coming off my bat, and I can't throw it as far. But by God, I'm going to show up and we're going to get after it, right? So let me pause there. It just that got me kind of through, midway through college. We are at this point.
So you're midway through college. You've got 4 hip reconstructions. You've got thousands of hours on a bike. Your wife in between, your now wife in between, your girlfriend at the time, is wheeling you around campus. Which here you are, the star of the baseball team, and now in a wheelchair. I had to imagine at times. Did you ever think of quitting? Did you ever think of stopping? Did you ever think this isn't going to happen?
No doubt. There's no doubt about it. And I mean, when you are going back through step 1, even after in my physical therapy class was gait training. They're literally, I ran a 40-yard dash sub 4.5 at one point in my life, and I'm going back to learn how to walk again. Like, wait a second. So yeah, I'm not only thinking, am I going to quit, but when I get back, what's it going to be like, right? Am I going to be one of these guys that can't hang it up, and therefore I'm then seen as something subpar, or am I even going to be able to compete? The one thing I'll tell you, man, that kept me going was not only intrinsic motivation, but I was also peer elected captain 2 years in a row by my peers, right? So despite me having my legs, temporarily taken from me, and despite all the adversity that came through, my peers said, you know what? You're going to be our leader, right? From the bench, mind you. Most times your leader is the starting shortstop or the starting center fielder or the starting pitcher. He's not the guy sitting on the bench taking notes or doing bullpen charts because he can't play, right? So my peers elected me as a team captain from sitting on the sideline. So I said, despite even how my personal feelings were, I refuse to let my teammates down. Absolutely refuse it.
So you had an expectation to live up to, but obviously they nominated you, right? So that was for a reason, and it wasn't because they felt bad for you. It was because, hey, this guy is the guy that we know, it should be in this position. This is somebody that's a leader, and you were able to do it from the sideline, from the bench. But it also, I got to imagine, that gave you a little wind in your sails, so to speak, to be able to, take those first steps trying to learn to walk again, which is outrageous to think that here you are, a guy that ran sub 4.5, and you're having to learn how to walk again. I got to imagine that's a very challenging time, especially at a young age, right? I mean, you've got youth on your side, despite what your hips were telling you, but that had to be an incredibly challenging time. So you talked about for a minute your opportunity to train with some of these, we'll call them namelessly, future Hall of Famers. I love this story. If you can walk us through a little bit what that experience was like, when you're in that, in that situation, working out with them, and sort of the difference between your work ethic versus maybe what you were witnessing before your very eyes with some of the others?
Yeah. So I remember the first day I showed up, after I got over the sheer fact I was starstruck, right? And I made this commitment that, you know what, there's some physical talent here that I'm just never going to have, but we're going to work. And there was I guess it was my second workout specifically. I am soft tossing balls to one of my childhood heroes, and just hearing him hit balls, just ka, ka, ka. I mean, it just sounds like a gunshot coming off the bat. And we went to go do a respective training session right afterwards. And I remember we would do planks. They would bring him over a towel to put his elbows on, because he didn't want his elbows hurting by putting them on, even on a gym mat, which, as you well know, is pretty comfortable. They were putting towels under his elbows. They'd give him towels to wipe his sweat off his brow. They're mixing his protein shakes for him as he's getting to the next session. And we're getting headed into recovery. He's getting stretched out. I mean, this man is one who pulled up in an Aston Martin, by the way, decked out in sponsored gear, and oh, by the way, never wore the same outfit or same shoes twice. And here I am showing up with my repurposed Nikes, right? My elbows are bleeding because I don't have towels, and my sweat just pours off my face, and I may or may not get a protein shake afterwards. So it was one of those moments, man, where you just one, I realized, again, not going to have the sheer talent, but I also realized that these guys are putting their careers at risk, because despite talent at the top level, in this case in the MLB, dude, if you don't work, you don't take care of those small things we referenced early, that talent at some point will become par with the course, right? And I remember my dad telling me at a very young age, son, there's only a few people in this world that will have the decision to be able to make the decision of when to hang their cleats up, right? Everyone else, the game decides for you, or your body decides for you. There's only a few, Brett Favre, Peyton Manning, Michael Jordan, that get to decide when they stop playing because they were so good and worked so hard to play at such a level and maintain that level, where most other folks, like this guy, like the guy I'm referencing now, got to that level. He didn't sustain it because he didn't work, right? And so it was a couple of nice lessons, two that were really hard to swallow, but one that told me, what, all the things I learned as a child, they are true. So it was validation, Derek, if that makes sense, to my dad wasn't just a crazy person, right? Let me take that back. He is a crazy person, but he's one that the things he was teaching me, at least I know they're true. I'm seeing real world examples of these things right in front of my face. So that validation, that confirmation really helped me from that perspective.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's what I love about that story is because it truly tells you, you could wake up with God-given talent, but you don't put the work in. You don't do the fundamentals. You don't wake up every day. You don't show up every day. You don't put your elbows on the mat and bleed a little.
That's right.
You're not going to improve, right? You're not going to grow. You'll be stuck with that God-given talent, and versus seeing where it has the potential to take you. So walk us through sort of the rest of your athletic journey, how things sort of continued to unfold as you sort of entered, or I would say exited out of that that chase and into the real world, and what that process was like. What was that like going through for you?
Yeah, so I'd highlight a couple things. One, as I was working through the next steps in my life, and maybe I'm like through my junior year at this point, headed into my senior year. And in baseball, once you hit that kind of 22, 23-ish mark, you're getting to a point where if you don't have some looks, it's pretty much over. You can hang on, you can play independent ball, you can go and try and pull the minor league games where they sign you for a Happy Meal and a couple $100, and you got to ride around on a bus the rest of your life, right? You can take that route. So I was fighting with it, right? I don't want to hang them up, but I was also getting to the point where my body's just not allowing me to do what it used to let me to do. So am I going to take that path? Pretty much put my life on hold for 3 or 4 years and try and make it, right? Which is what I had been working to this whole time. Or can I take what I've learned? Can I hang up my cleats, or let the game allow me and accept it, that it's telling me to hang them up, it's time, and repurpose those learnings and move forward. But there was an interesting journey that I went on, man. I was the picture of physical health. Stood 6'2", 6'3", $185, 6% body fat, could run, could jump, could hit, could throw, but I wasn't healthy, right? And so I started not only the hip stuff. I'm realizing I got some inflammation in my body, obviously, but I'm also having migraines and I'm having panic attacks and just feeling some really weird, not so great symptoms. So I went on this journey to figure out not only what's my next step in life, but what are the things that are going to get me there. So I then started to look internally to the things I was putting in my body, right? The music I was listening to, the things I'd watch or not watch on television, right? So I started pulling from all these places, Derek, that were not just, can I get in a weight room? Can I lift the heaviest dumbbell in there? Can I run the fastest 40-yard dash? But when I get done, what are the other areas of my life that I need to be paying attention to, the folks that I'm surrounded by, right? Again, the things that I'm consuming both physically and virtually. And respectively, what is my viewpoints on life and where's it going to take me? So as I transitioned out, I did accept that, you know what, it's time, right? Begin to look for my professional opportunities, just as many of us do coming out of college. Still at that point, wasn't totally sure of what I wanted to do. But here's what I did know. I knew that I was going to give myself the best chance, right? And I was going to surround myself with people who are going to give me the best chance, mentor me, feed me, pour into me, both, again, personally and professionally. So that journey, right, really got me to a point to understanding what health actually looks and feels like, what the people around me should look and sound like, and most importantly, what are my dreams? What is my why? And I really got to search for that so that I can continue to stay motivated, because now motivation no longer looks like, can you outdo your peers on a court or on a field? Can you be at the top from a batting average perspective, or the most home runs or the most doubles or most stolen bases? But now those things start to take on a different look, right? So now it's more of the, can I go and perform professionally? So the metrics, if you will, now change, right? And the viewpoints of those people and how they view me now changes. So I've got to put on a different hat, taking the same learnings, but now it just looks and feels a whole lot different, man. So that journey began to really, really transition me into the next phase of my professional career.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's all the things that you mentioned. It, you know, when we take a look at an athlete, we take a look at somebody that's strong from the outside, like you said, can, you know, it has the physical stature, the physique, and all that. But we don't realize potentially what's going on with that person inside. And here you were, like you said, the perfect model of health, the picture of health, but inside you're dying, right? You're rotting away.
Yeah.
You're starting. You know, I think a lot of people can relate to that story and try to understand, you know, some of the things. Kind of walk us through some of the things, if you're to sort of advise the listeners, having gone through that journey, right? Having been in that dark place, having been not feeling great, having migraines, how you dissected that, right? Spend a minute and just sort of talk about how you're able to figure that out, because you know, I know you sought out advice from others and things like that, but you went through a journey and through a process to living what we'll call as a very, I don't know if holistic or naturalistic is the right word, type of lifestyle now, but you're in such better physical shape now than even when you were in your top, you know, athletic peak all around.
Yeah.
And I think
No
people
question.
frame it in the wrong way, right, Chaz? They frame it in, oh, that guy looks really good. He's got big pecs, right? He's got bulging biceps, and you can throw a baseball really far. But it's a lot more than that.
There was a pivotal moment that speaks to exactly what you're touching on, and that moment was actually sitting in West Africa. I was there on my 4th or 5th mission trip, which I took, you know, at two or 2.5 weeks out of every year, and went and served with a Christian ministry to build hospitals, to build maternity wards for an area that had an infant mortality rate of greater than 50% at the time, and to really go and try and take my skill sets and just my time, right, the scarcest resource of them all, and pour it into others. A friend of mine got sick on that trip, and so we're in the hospital, and I don't notice. I mean, I'm talking deathly sick, Derek. We don't know if it's malaria. We don't know at the time Ebola was in the area. We have no idea what's happening to him, but he's like at the point where he may not make it. And at that time, I remember thinking, I'm in a hospital here in West Africa, we're in the country of Ghana, and there's no pharmaceutical cabinets. There's no real therapies that I'm noticing. And so I went to one of the physicians there and I said, hey man, this guy is sick. Like, I don't see any medicine. Is it because we're sitting in a third world country, or is it because of some other contributing factors? And there's no question that remote access and access to resources was a problem. But I remember thinking, where are the medicines? And I remember him pointing. At that time, he pointed to a palm tree, a coconut tree, and I'm thinking like, whoa, like he's pointing at the earth as the pharmaceuticals, right? He's not pointing me to a pill bottle, right? or a bag of IVs. He's pointing me to resources around him that are God-given resources to this group. That really kicked me into kind of this next phase of life where I now knew that the American dream, as I mentioned earlier, right? The way in which, to your point, how we look at others, how we classify someone being healthy or rich or having something of abundance, it is flawed. It is absolutely flawed. And so now at this time, this trip, not only understanding what actual wealth looks like from being there and taking 6 trips to a West African jungle, but now also understanding what does health look like? How do we treat our bodies? I mean, these are folks at the time that I was learning from that have no more than the shoes on their feet, a day's dollar wage, but are happier and more joyful than most people I know sitting in this country. So it took me now, again, I was already a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, on this journey, Derek, but that skyrocketed my pace of trying to figure out a life of abundance, right? What does that look like? And it's a full circle. It's not only the things I'm feeding myself, it's those around me, but it's also a spiritual component, right? That these folks are being fed by. This in this particular journey was their Christian faith. And what's interesting, when you start to go look at the blue zone groups of this world, these are all the things, right, that you start to see. Not only is their diet, it's their community, it's their daily exercise, it's their sense of belonging, but it's also a belief in a higher being. These are all the characteristics of these folks who live on average well into their hundreds. And so, man, it just began to start coming full circle. So changed my diet, started changing the way in which I exercised, right? Again, to your point earlier, it's no longer now about how much weight can I stick on a barbell, but now it's about, can I get my body to move functionally? Can I rid it of its inflammation? And what's interesting is simultaneously, the American mindset is, and the food we're being fed, the commercials we see on TV, the things we see on the news are, again, direct competition with what I knew to be true in many cases, right? And so, right, you're battling, one's a little guilt, because you're coming back from a third world country trying to live in this world, right? But in our daily life, which is hard. But also, you're also battling the fact that the things that you're being told and what you've been learned over the last 30 years, there's a lot of falsehoods, a lot of misinformation in that data, right? That I know to be false, because of the journey that I was on and how to treat myself, my body, and those around me. So, man, if it weren't for that trip, DP, I would never have gotten to a point of really grasping what health and wealth should feel and mean to us.
Yeah, and I can stand before the audience today and say that Chaz, out of all the people in my circle, those who I know, he's the person that I reach out to when it comes to asking questions about, have you tried this from a health and wellness perspective? What do you feel about this respective supplement? I went vegan for a month. Well, I told you about that and like why I was doing it. So to be able to have those conversations with somebody like you from a physical perspective, but then also the conversations that we have also from, like you said, you are the summation of the 5 people you surround yourself with, one of which could be your television and your phone, right? What you're consuming, right. The effect that it has on you. So it's so good to see, especially of a guy of your young age, that you've grasped that, and you grasped it through an incredible experience, while on mission. Those 6 times that you went out there and did God's work. It's just incredible. Something that I hope everyone has the opportunity to experience in their own way. But it came through you giving your time, giving your love to somebody else. And I think that's a big lesson to learn here, is that what you took away from giving you is something that is going to carry you through your life, and give you that life of, as you said, abundance, the right way, right? Not dollar bills and the Ferraris, but family, love, and all those things. So now, Chaz, last question for you.
Okay.
You said a lot today. You covered a lot of things on the show. And you just, I think you informed the listener of so many different things that they can take and walk away with. But we're all busy. We all have things that we're distracted by. If there's one thing that you discussed today, or maybe did not discuss today, that you could give as advice or as a nugget of information to the audience that would help them live the absolute best life and become the best version of themselves, what would that be?
I immediately am drawn to a biblical verse, Derek, which is essentially sums up and says, this life is not my own. If you can take a stance that says, I am second, despite what we're all being fed, to be the best, to be the top, to be the richest, to be the fastest, is any multimedia today is what it's trying to tell us. If you can take a stance to say, I am second, and maybe that's your family, in some cases, your coworkers, a complete stranger you'll interact with today or tomorrow, and a stance that says, you know what, I am thankful for the life that has been given to me, despite how long it'll last, despite how fruitful it may or may not be. But you know what, I woke up today with oxygen in my lungs, and I woke up today with an opportunity to live in the greatest country ever established on this world. And let that be the burning fire inside of you to know that ultimately this life is temporary. And that is the approach that needs to be taken. So when we talk about time being a scarce resource, there's no more truth to that statement than to simply say, yes, that is absolutely true. It is a finite resource, which is why this life, even if you live to be 85, 90, 100 years old, that is still a snap or a breath away from being over. And so if you can take that approach to your life, I really believe it'll be a life that will be worth living. I read a book, and I'll leave you with this. It was by a gentleman who was actually sitting in a church conference, and he had a quote. He's 80, 85 years old at the time, and he just broke into tears at this conference. And they said he ran up to the pew of the conference, of the venue, which is kind of in the church world, it's kind of the front row at the altar, if you will. And he kept crying out, I've wasted it. I've wasted it. Where he had this moment, Derek, where it was this overwhelming moment where he felt like his life was coming to an end. Obviously, at 85 in this country, you're well above mean. You're getting close, right? And he had this moment of just like, I didn't live it to its fullest. It passed me by. And so I read this book called Don't Waste Your Life, man. And so that's what I would leave this audience with is don't waste it. And for whatever that looks like for you, right? You may not be a man or woman of faith, and that's fine, right? But for whatever it means and looks like for you, do not waste it.
I'm going to end with that. No comment, because you just completely summed it up. We'll put that book in the notes for those who want the ability to potentially give it a good read. I'll get that information from you, Chaz. Chaz, I know you're a busy man. I appreciate you carving out an hour of your time to be able to talk to us, to enlighten us, to tell your story and the message behind the story. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you, brother. My pleasure, DP. Thanks for having me.
You got it.
Hey everybody, thank you for listening to the Adapt You podcast today. Our goal with this show and all of our content is to deliver you the guests and the respective knowledge necessary to help you change something in your life. Everyone who listens to this show has something they want to affect and something they want to change. And our goal is to help give you the knowledge necessary to take you down that path on becoming the absolute best version of yourself. If you like what you heard today, please tune in to all of our shows and also check us out in social media. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, and check out our website and have some great content on there as well. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next show.